Welcome to Wild Cowboy Talus. Before you listen, let me know where you're listening from. In a land carved by sun and steel, where bloodlines run as deep as riverbeds, peace often demands a price only the heart can pay. To territories clashing for survival, find their last hope in a forced union, a marriage not of passion, but of desperate necessity. Can a bond forged in duty truly ignite the fires of love, or will the untamed spirit of the West tear their fragile alliance apart? Prepare for a tale of grit, gunpowder, and the unexpected blaze of a true love's flame. Chapter 1: The Weight of the Ring. The dust of the Texas plains clung to Eliza Mav Holloway's riding skirt, a familiar coating that tasted of endless sky and bitter freedom. She sat astride her mare, sundown, atop a windswept mesa, her gaze fixed on the expanse of land that stretched before her. To the east lay the sprawling Double H Ranch, her family's legacy, a patchwork of sun-baked corrals, sturdy bunkhouses, and the imposing main house built of rough-hewn timber and stubborn pride. To the west, starkly delineated by the treacherous Devil's Backbone Ridge, lay the territory of the Blackthorns, their rivals, their sworn enemies. And in between, the constant, simmering tension that threatened to erupt into a full-blown range war. Eliza adjusted the brim of her worn hat, shielding her eyes from the relentless afternoon sun. Her red gold hair, usually tamed in a severe braid, had escaped in tendrils around her temples, testament to the long, sleepless nights she'd endured. She was no stranger to hardship. Since her father, old Silas Holloway, had taken a bullet in a skirmish a year ago, it had fallen to Eliza, the eldest and most headstrong of his children, to keep the Double H afloat. She managed the ranch, rode the lines, stared down rustlers, and fought off encroaching cattle barons with a steely gaze and a shotgun never far from her reach. At 24, she was more comfortable in denim and leather than in calico and lace, her hands calloused, her spirit broken. But even her formidable strength was buckling under the weight of the past few months. The drought was relentless, drying up vital water sources. The cattle were thinning, and the whispers of a new, ambitious land speculator from the east, a man named Sterling Vance, were growing louder. Vance wasn't interested in cattle. He was interested in the mineral rights rumored to lie beneath both the Double H and the Blackthorn territories. And he was expertly playing both sides against the middle, exacerbating their long-standing feud. It was this encroaching threat, this unseen viper coiled around their very survival, that had led to the unthinkable. An arranged marriage. A forced union. Her brother, young Thomas, had ridden hard for 3 days, eventually returning with a grim-faced emissary from the Blackthorn patriarch, old Jebediah Blackthorn. The message was stark: unite or perish. The only way to present a formidable front against Vance, to pool their dwindling resources, and to finally cease the bloodshed that had plagued their families for generations, was for the Holloway and Blackthorn lines to intertwine. And the chosen participants were Eliza, the fiery head of the Double H, and Caleb Blackthorn, Jebediah's equally formidable eldest son. Eliza snorted, the sound lost in the wind. Caleb Blackthorn. She'd seen him only a handful of times, usually across a dusty field during a cattle drive or in the tense silence of a border dispute. He was a broad-shouldered man, built like a mountain, with eyes the color of storm clouds and a reputation for being as unyielding as the Texas granite. A man carved from the same stubborn rock as her own father. The very thought of him sent a shiver of distaste down her spine. Marry him. She'd sooner wrestle a grizzly. Yet, her family's survival depended on it. Thomas, her younger sister Lily, and all the men who worked the Double H their livelihoods, their very lives rested on her decision. The elders of both families had met, a tense, an easy council in neutral territory, brokered by the weary circuit judge. The terms were clear: a year-long marriage, a truce to consolidate their ranching operations, and a united front against Vance. If it failed, they would revert to their separate lands, presumably to fall one by one to the land speculator. If it succeeded, well, then spoken hope was that two warring families might finally find peace. Eliza dismounted, letting sundown graze on a few hardy sprigs of grass. She walked to the edge of the mesa, gazing westward again. She imagined Caleb Blackthorn doing the same on his side, his face undoubtedly set in the same expression of furious resignation as her own. She pictured his dark hair, perpetually wine-tossed, his strong jaw, the way he carried himself with an almost arrogant confidence. He was everything she mistrusted in a man: domineering, proud, and a blackthorn. A week later, the wedding day arrived, ushered in by a sky heavy with unfulfilled promises of rain. The ceremony was held in the small, unassuming church in the dusty town of Harmony Creek, a place that had rarely lived up to its name. Both families, dressed in their Sunday best but armed with palpable hostility, filled the pews. The air was thick with tension, like gunpowder before a spark. Eliza wore her mother's wedding dress, a simple cream-colored gown of lace and fine cotton. It felt alien and constricting, a symbol of the cage she was about to step into. Her hair was gathered in a loose bun, a few curls escaping round her face. She felt like a prized mare being led to stud, not a woman about to embark on the most sacred of vows. Her brother Thomas, his face pale and solemn, walked her down the aisle, his hand trembling slightly on her arm. Caleb Blackthorne stood at the altar, beside his grizzled father, Jebediah, and his younger brother, Ethan. Caleb was a formidable presence in his dark suit, his usual rugged persona softened, yet intensified, by the formal wear. His gaze, when it met Eliza's, was unreadable, a stormy gray that gave nothing away. There was no warmth, no welcome, only a shared understanding of the grim duty they were about to perform. His jaw was set, a muscle ticking faintly beneath his sun-darkened skin. He looked like a man condemned, not a groom. The circuit judge, doubling as the officiant, cleared his throat, his voice thin and nervous in the hushed church. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of Eliza Maeve Holloway and Caleb Jedediah Blackthorne." Eliza heard the words as if from a great distance, her mind reeling. She felt the weight of the ring in the judge's hand, a plain gold band, symbolizing not love, but a covenant of survival. Her eyes drifted to Caleb's hand, strong and calloused, resting on the Bible. The hand of a rancher, a fighter, and now her husband. When it came time for the vows, the judge looked between them, his unease palpable. "Do you, Eliza Maeve Holloway, take Caleb Jedediah Blackthorne to be your lawfully wedded husband, to live together in holy matrimony, according to God's ordinance?" Eliza swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. The entire future of the Double H, of her family, hinged on this moment. She looked at Thomas, at Lily, at the faces of her ranch hands, their hopes etched in their anxious expressions. Then she looked at Caleb, his eyes still unreadable, but a flicker of something the similar sense of sacrifice, perhaps, passed between them. It was a shared burden, a silent understanding of their captivity. "I do," she said, her voice a little shaky, but firm. It was a vow not to a man, but to her land, her people, and a desperate gamble for peace. Caleb's turn came, and he met her gaze with a stoic defiance. "And do you, Caleb Jedediah Blackthorne, take Eliza Maeve Holloway to be your lawfully wedded wife?" His eyes, those stormy gray eyes, held hers. She saw the proud and tamed spirit that mirrored her own, caged by the same harsh necessity. He took a deep breath, his broad chest expanding under the dark fabric of his suit. "I do," he stated, his voice a low rumble, devoid of tenderness, yet filled with an undeniable resolve. The judge pronounced them husband and wife, a forced union under the unblinking eye of a vengeful West. Caleb leaned in, his breath warm against her ear, and whispered, "This ring might bind our lands, Holloway, but it doesn't bind my heart. Don't forget that." Eliza looked up, her gaze meeting his, fire meeting ice. "Nor mine, Blackthorne. Don't you forget that either." The unspoken promise of a battle of wills hung in the air, a silent prelude to the storm that had just begun. The forced vows were spoken, but true love's flame felt a million miles away, lost somewhere in the vast and forgiving plains. Chapter 2: An Uneasy Coexistence. The raw, unfamiliar weight of Caleb Blackthorne's hand, placed briefly and impersonally on her back as they exited the Harmony Creek Church, sent a jolt through Eliza. It was the touch of a handler, not a husband. The thin, nervous smiles of the townsfolk felt like daggers, their hushed whispers a cacophony of judgment and disbelief. She knew what they saw: two warring territories, forced to embrace a desperate peace, their union a fragile compromise bought with unwilling hearts. The ride back to the Blackthorne ranch felt impossibly long, the silence in the buckboard wagon between Eliza and Caleb heavier than the noonday sun. Caleb sat rigid, his gaze fixed on the horizon, his jaw tight. Eliza, still encased in her mother's wedding gown, felt a suffocating constriction, as if the lace was tightening around her throat. Her own family, Thomas and Lily, rode behind them, their faces grim. The Holloway Ranch hands, loyal but bewildered, rode in a separate group, their eyes constantly darting to the Blackthorn cowboys who flanked them. The tension was a living thing, breathing in the hot, dusty air. As they approached the Blackthorn homestead, Eliza felt a surge of familiar resentment. It was a sturdy, well-kept ranch, sprawling across a wide, fertile valley, richer in water than her own Double H. It was a constant reminder of the advantages the Blackthorns had always seemed to possess, advantages that had often fueled the very feud they were now attempting to bury. The main house was larger than her own, built of dark, heavy timber, with a wide, shaded porch. It felt alien and welcoming. Caleb dismounted, not offering a hand, and Eliza followed suit, gathering her cumbersome skirts. Jebediah Blackthorn, Caleb's grizzled father, stood on the porch, his face a craggy landscape of suspicion and relief. His younger son, Ethan, a quieter, more observant man than his brother, stood beside him, his expression unreadable. "Welcome to your new home, Mrs. Blackthorn," Jebediah said, his voice gruff, the title feeling like a brand. There was no warmth in his greeting, only grudging acceptance. "It's still Holloway, to my friends," Eliza retorted, unable to resist the bite in her voice, instantly regretting it as Jebediah's eyes narrowed. Caleb stepped forward, placing a hand on Eliza's arm, a silent warning. "Let's go inside, Eliza. It's been a long day." The name, spoken by him, felt like a stranger's touch. Inside, the house was cool and dark, sparsely furnished but impeccably clean. A woman, thin and sharp-featured, Caleb's Aunt Martha, who kept house, offered a stiff nod. The air in the parlor was thick with unspoken expectations. "We have prepared a room for you, Eliza," Caleb stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "It's at the end of the hall. Your things have already been moved." Eliza felt a flicker of defiance. "And your room?" "The one at the other end," he replied, his gaze unwavering. "As per our agreement, this is a marriage of necessity, not convenience. There will be separate quarters." His words, though expected, still stung. He was laying down the law, making their forced vows abundantly clear. The wedding night passed in an agonizing silence. Eliza lay in her new bed, a comfortable but foreign mattress, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Blackthorn Ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the creak of the wind through the eaves. She stared at the ceiling, her mind racing, replaying Caleb's blunt words. He had made it clear, this was a business arrangement, a cold alliance. And she, Eliza Holloway, would be treated as nothing more than a strategic asset. She vowed silently that she would not be a docile one. The next morning, the uneasy coexistence began in earnest. Eliza, dressed in her familiar riding clothes, sturdy denim, a practical shirt, and her worn leather vest. Aunt Martha, upon seeing her, gave a disapproving sniff. A wife's place is in the house, tending to her husband's home, not out galloping across the plains like a wild mustang. Eliza met her gaze with a defiant stare. "My place is where I'm needed, Martha. And the Double H needs me on its lines, not baking biscuits." Caleb, who had entered the kitchen, merely grunted, his gaze sweeping over her attire. "She's right, Aunt. Eliza runs a ranch. Let her run it." His unexpected defense, though gruff, surprised Eliza. It was a small concession, but a concession nonetheless. Their attempts at cooperation over the next few weeks were a continuous clash of wills. They rode the combined range together, trying to assess the full scope of their new, shared territory. But every decision became a battleground. "We need to move the herd to the south pasture," Eliza declared one blistering afternoon, pointing to a stretch of greener grass. "The North Fork's drying up too fast." Caleb shook his head, his face set. "No, the south pasture is too close to the Vance line. He's been sending riders over, testing our fences. We need to keep a strong presence there. The North Fork will hold out another week, and we'll lose too many head," Eliza argued, her voice rising. "I know this land, Caleb. You can't gamble with livestock during a drought." "And I know Vance, Eliza," Caleb retorted, turning his stormy gray eyes on her. "He's a snake, and he'll exploit any weakness. My men are already spread thin on that border." Their arguments often ended in a stalemate, or a grudging compromise that satisfied neither of them. Their ranch hands, witnessing these daily skirmishes, remained wary, clinging to their old loyalties. The Holloway men grumbled about Blackthorn's stubbornness, and the Blackthorn men muttered about Holloway recklessness. One particularly frustrating day, after a heated argument about diverting a small spring, Eliza snapped, "You know, Caleb, for a man who claims to want peace, you do a mighty good job of making war, even with your own wife." Caleb turned, his eyes flashing. "And you, Eliza, for a woman who swore a vow, you do a damn fine job of forgetting it was for our survival, not just yours. This ain't about what you want, it's about what we need." The words hung in the air, sharp and painful. He was right, of course. It was about them. About the families, the land, the fragile future they were desperately trying to build. But the truth of their situation, the constant battle between their individual pride and their collective necessity, was exhausting. The shadow of Sterling Vance, however, was a constant, undeniable presence, a viper waiting to strike. Weeks after the wedding, rumors reached them of Vance buying up more small homesteads bordering their combined territories, forcing desperate families off their land with legal threats and armed intimidation. Then came the first overt act of aggression. A small, isolated Blackthorn cattle herd, grazing near the Devil's Backbone, was found scattered and some of the finest breeding stock had vanished. Caleb and his men rode out in a fury, but the tracks were expertly covered, leading to nowhere. "It's Vance," Caleb stated, his voice low and dangerous, as they gathered in the Blackthorn parlor that evening. "He's testing us, seeing if we'll crack. He wants to bleed us dry," Eliza added, her own anger simmering. "Push us to the brink, then swoop in and buy us out cheap." She watched Caleb, a strange sense of unity beginning to stir within her. For all their personal friction, they faced a common, formidable enemy. "We need to respond, Ethan," Caleb's younger brother urged. "Show him we're united. Send a message." "Ethan's right," Eliza said, surprising herself by agreeing with a Blackthorn. "We can't let him think we're weak. We pull our riders, patrol the border together. Make it clear he's dealing with one undivided force now." Caleb looked at her, his stormy eyes meeting hers. For a moment, the animosity seemed to dissipate, replaced by a shared resolve. "You might be right, Holloway." For once, the grudging concession, a small victory, felt significant. The external threat, it seemed, was beginning to forge a fragile bridge between them, a reluctant, uneasy acknowledgement that their survival truly depended on this forced union. The vows had been spoken under duress, but the whispers of a shared peril were slowly, inexorably, beginning to quiet the echoes of their long-standing feud. Chapter 3: Shared Peril, Lingering Doubts. The air was heavy with the stench of dust and rising tension as Eliza, Caleb, and a combined force of their ranch hands rode towards the western border. Vance's latest provocation, the brazen theft of their prized breeding stock, had been the spark that finally ignited a unified, if still begrudging, response. The sun beat down, turning the sparse landscape into a shimmering mirage, but no mirage could hide the grim determination etched on the faces of the men. Eliza rode beside Caleb, the silence between them less hostile, more concentrated. She wore her usual riding gear, her rifle in its scabbard, her hand instinctively resting on the butt of her pistol. Caleb, a formidable presence even in the saddle, scanned the horizon with the intensity of a hawk. Their respective ranch hands, though riding shoulder to shoulder, still kept a subtle distance, their old feuds a ghost between them. "Vance is getting bolder," Caleb stated, his voice a low rumble, breaking the silence. "He knows the drought is hurting us. He's pressing his advantage." "He misjudges us," Eliza replied, her gaze fixed on the treacherous Devil's Backbone ridge ahead. "He thinks a forced marriage means a weak alliance. We'll show him otherwise." Caleb gave a curt nod, a flicker of something that might have been approval in his gray eyes. "We split into two groups at the ridge. You take the north pass, I'll take the south. Look for tracks, anything. If you find trouble, don't engage alone. Send a signal." Eliza bristled slightly at the implied command, but acknowledged the wisdom of it. "Understood, Blackthorn. And you do the same. Don't go charging into a hornet's nest just to prove a point." He gave her a sidelong glance, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Wouldn't dream of it, Holloway." Not when I've got a wife to keep an eye on. The barb was there, but it lacked its usual sting, replaced by a strange, almost playful challenge. They split up at the Devil's Backbone. Eliza led her group, composed mostly of her Holloway hands and a few of Caleb's more experienced trackers, through the North Pass. The terrain was unforgiving, rocky, treacherous, and crisscrossed with ancient game trails. They rode for hours, the only sounds the creak of leather and the snorting of horses. Then, just as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, their lead scout signaled. Tracks. Fresh ones. Leading towards a hidden canyon, known to hold a scarce but reliable spring. Vance's men, Eliza muttered, drawing her rifle. They're holding our cattle there, watering them. She debated sending a signal to Caleb, but the canyon mouth was narrow, easily defended. If they waited, Vance's men might move the cattle again. We move in, she ordered, her voice low and decisive. Carefully. We surprise them. We get our cattle back. They dismounted, moving stealthily towards the canyon entrance. Eliza took point, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was a rancher, a leader, but this was a raiding party, an act of war. She pushed away the fear, focusing on the task. As they peered into the canyon, they saw them three of Vance's hired guns, coarse-faced men, guarding a small herd of their missing cattle, watering them at the spring. One of them, a notorious rustler named Snake Fallon, known for his cruelty, was prodding one of their prize bulls with a rifle butt. All right, Eliza whispered to her men. On my signal, take them down, but don't kill unless you have to. We want answers. She counted to 3, then burst from cover, her rifle barking. The element of surprise was complete. Her men followed, their shouts echoing in the canyon. Vance's men, caught off guard, scrambled for their weapons. Snake Fallon, a blur of motion, drew his pistol and fired, the shout whizzing past Eliza's head. She returned fire, aiming for his gun hand, forcing him to drop his weapon with a yelp of pain. Another of Vance's men went down, hit in the leg by one of her Holloway hands. The third wrestler, seeing the tide turn, tried to escape, scrambling up the canyon wall. Suddenly, a rifle shot rang out from the ridge above, dropping him with chilling precision. Then another, and another. Caleb and his men, alerted by the gunfire, had arrived, taking up positions overlooking the canyon. Need some help, Holloway, Caleb's voice boomed down from above, a wry note in his tone. Eliza, grinning despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins, yelled back, took you long enough, Blackthorn. Thought you might have gotten lost. The skirmish was quickly over. Snake Fallon and his remaining men were captured, their faces bruised and defiant. The cattle, though thirsty and agitated, were secured. As Caleb descended into the canyon, his gaze met Eliza's. There was an unspoken understanding, a shared thrill of victory, and something else, a deep, almost primal respect. You're a damn good shot, Holloway, Caleb admitted, his eyes holding a new admiration. And you move like a shadow. Reckon I owe you a thank you for keeping my men out of trouble. And you, Blackthorn, Eliza countered, your timing's impeccable. And your men shoot straight. Looks like we make a pretty good team. Later that evening, back at the Blackthorn Ranch, exhaustion mingled with a quiet sense of triumph. The captured wrestlers were locked in the empty root cellar, awaiting the circuit judge. The cattle were safely back in their corrals. The combined ranch hands, sharing a hearty meal, looked at each other with a new, tentative camaraderie. Eliza, nursing a cup of strong coffee, felt ache in her bones, but also a strange lightness in her spirit. She had faced danger with Caleb, fought beside him, and seen him in his element. He was a force of nature, unwavering, intelligent, and fiercely protective of his land and his people. He wasn't just the stubborn Blackthorn heir, he was a leader she could, grudgingly, respect. Caleb approached her, a tin cup in his hand. You did well today, Eliza, he said, the use of her first name feeling less like a formal address and more like a quiet acknowledgement. You could have waited for us, but you took the initiative. It paid off. And you backed me up, without a second thought, she replied, meeting his gaze. We saved those cattle. That's a win for both our lands. He nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. This truce. It's holding. For now. For now, Eliza agreed. The lingering doubts about their forced union hadn't vanished entirely, but they had quieted. They had faced shared peril, and in doing so, had found a sliver of common ground, a foundation of grudging respect. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was a beginning. The fire of the feud still smoldered, but a new, fragile ember of understanding had been kindled in its ashes. Chapter 4: Beyond the Feud. The successful retrieval of the stolen cattle marked a subtle but significant shift in the atmosphere at the Blackthorn Ranch. The overt hostility between the two families' ranch hands lessened, replaced by a cautious camaraderie born of shared success and mutual respect. Eliza found herself conversing more freely with Caleb's men, listening to their insights on cattle and weather, and even sharing a laugh or two. The lines between Holloway and Blackthorn, though still visible, were beginning to blur. Caleb, for his part, started to seek out Eliza's opinions more frequently, not just on matters concerning the Double H, but on general ranch management. He'd find her inspecting fences or checking on the cattle and would ride up, his usual gruffness softened by a hint of curiosity. One afternoon, they rode together to inspect the Blackthorn's northernmost pasture, a vast stretch of land that abutted a dry, rocky canyon. "This land has always been a challenge," Caleb admitted, gesturing to the rugged terrain. "Good grazing, but hard to work. We lose a few head every year to falling rock or straying into the canyon, and the old Blackthorn well here runs dry too often." Eliza dismounted, examining the cracked earth around the well. "My father, he had a similar problem on the Double H, near the Rattlesnake Gulch. He tried a new irrigation method, digging a deeper aquifer well and channeling the water through a series of shallow, clay-lined trenches. It was risky, but it worked. Doubled his grazing capacity in that area." Caleb looked at her, a thoughtful expression on his face. Silas Holloway was a stubborn man, but he was no fool when it came to the land. "I might have to take a look at those plans of his." It was a profound concession for a Blackthorn to acknowledge the ingenuity of a Holloway. As they continued their ride, Eliza found herself speaking more openly about the Double H's challenges: the dwindling water, the aging equipment, the difficulty of finding reliable hands after years of skirmishes. She described her father's struggles, his innovations, and his ultimate, tragic end. Caleb listened intently, offering practical advice and, occasionally, a surprising depth of understanding. He spoke of the Blackthorn family's own history, their long-standing feud with the Holloways, rooted in a generations-old dispute over a particularly rich water source. "My grandfather," Caleb explained, gesturing towards an ancient, gnarled mesquite tree, "he swore your great-grandfather poisoned this very spring during a dry spell. Said it cost him half his herd." Eliza looked at the tree, then at Caleb. "My grandmother always said your grandfather diverted the spring upstream, leaving ours dry. Said it drove her to an early grave, watching her cattle starve." They realized, with a startling clarity, that the feud was a narrative, a story passed down, each side convinced of their own righteousness, their own victimhood. The truth, buried under decades of accusations and bloodshed, was probably far more nuanced. "Sterling Vance," Eliza stated, breaking the somber silence, "he's thriving on those old stories. He sees us as divided, easy picking. He's a master at it," Caleb agreed, his jaw tightening. "He's been whispering lies, planting rumors. He told old man Jenkins, who just sold his homestead near our border, that the Double H was planning to annex his land. He told some of your hands that we were going to force them off their jobs after the merger." They shared a look of grim understanding. Vance wasn't just a land speculator, he was a manipulator, skillfully using their historical animosity as a weapon against them. He was not just trying to buy their land, he was trying to break their spirit, to rekindle the very hatred they were fighting to extinguish. Later that week, Eliza accompanied Caleb to the Widow's Peak mine, an old Blackthorn claim that had once yielded a small amount of silver but had been abandoned years ago. Caleb believed Vance might be looking at it, not for silver, but for something else. Inside the damp, echoing tunnels, they found evidence of recent activity: fresh boot prints, discarded dynamite wrappers, and strange geological samples. "These aren't for silver," Caleb muttered, examining a rock sample. "These are for coal. Or perhaps something even more valuable. Deeper down." They looked at each other, a chilling realization dawning on them. Vance wasn't just after ranch land. He was after mineral rights, something far more lucrative. And if he acquired both their territories, he would control a vast, potentially invaluable tract of land. As they emerged from the mine, dust-covered and thoughtful, Caleb turned to Eliza. "We have more than just a fight for our ranches, Eliza. We have a fight for our future. Vance is playing a much bigger game than we thought. And if we don't present a united front, truly united, he'll swallow us whole." His words resonated deeply with Eliza. The shared peril had always been about the land, the cattle, the financial survival. But now, it was about something more profound: their heritage, their way of life, and the very independence they both fiercely cherished. The forced marriage was slowly, agonizingly, transforming into a true partnership. The seeds of understanding, planted in the dusty soil of their shared history, were beginning to sprout, pushing through the hard-packed earth of their long-standing feud. They were beginning to see beyond the names Holloway and Blackthorn, to the determined, capable people beneath, bound by a common threat, and perhaps, by something more. Chapter 5: Whispers of Betrayal. The discovery of Vance's true intentions at just land acquisition but the exploitation of vast mineral resource cast a new, more sinister light on their precarious alliance. Eliza and Caleb, united by this shared understanding, felt a growing sense of urgency. Their forced marriage, once a mere truce, was now a critical strategic defense. Yet, even as their common purpose deepened, Vance, ever the opportunist, launched a calculated attack aimed directly at the heart of their fragile union: trust. The trouble began subtly. One morning, a small, but vital, herd of newly acquired breeding mares from the Double H, pastured on Blackthorn land, was found stampeded, some injured, others missing. The fence had been deliberately cut, not by cattle, but by human hands. "Sabotage," Caleb stated, his voice grim, as he surveyed the damage with Eliza. "And it points to someone who knows our rotation, knows our layout." Whispers began to circulate among the ranch hands. "Who benefits from divided ranks?" they murmured. "Who stands to gain if the alliance falls apart?" Eliza overheard a Blackthorn ranch hand, old Jed, a lifelong loyalist, casting suspicious glances at Thomas Holloway, Eliza's younger brother. Then, a few days later, a critical shipment of winter feed, intended for the combined herds, mysteriously disappeared from the Blackthorn storage barn. The lock had been expertly picked. Again, the whispers grew louder. "Holloway men, always to fancy with their fingers," one Blackthorn hand muttered within earshot of Eliza. "Maybe they're still sore about losing their land to the Blackthorns." The accusations, though veiled, were pointed. Eliza's temper flared. She confronted Jedediah, Caleb's father, who had always been cold towards her. "Your men are spreading lies, Jebediah. They're accusing my brother, my people, of sabotage." Jebediah merely shrugged, his eyes unyielding. "Accusations or observations, Eliza. The mares were yours. The feed was for the combined herd. Who stands to gain if the Blackthorns are weakened?" "We are one ranch now," Eliza retorted, her voice rising. "Weakening you weakens us all." The tension in the air was palpable, threatening to reignite the old feuds. Caleb stepped between them, his face a mask of frustration. "That's enough, both of you. This is what Vance wants. He wants us fighting each other, not him." But the seeds of doubt had been planted. The next day, a Blackthorn ranch hand, a gruff but honest man named Silas, approached Caleb, his face troubled. "Boss, I saw Thomas Holloway riding out late the night the feed went missing. He was acting peculiar. Looked like he was carrying something large under his poncho." Caleb's gaze immediately sought Eliza's. Her heart sank. Thomas, her impulsive, sometimes reckless brother, was indeed capable of foolish decisions, though not malicious ones. But the implication was clear. He was being framed, and the evidence, however circumstantial, was damning. "It's not Thomas," Eliza insisted, her voice tight with anger and fear. "He would never betray us. He knows what's at stake." "Silas is a good man, Eliza," Caleb said, his voice quiet, but his eyes were filled with an unmistakable doubt. "He wouldn't lie. What was Thomas doing out so late?" "I don't know," she admitted, her frustration boiling over. "But it doesn't mean he stole the feed. This is Vance's doing, I tell you. He's trying to break us." The argument escalated into a fierce confrontation. Caleb, burdened by the loyalty he owed his own men and his father's persistent suspicions, struggled with what he had heard. He knew Eliza's fierce loyalty to her family. He knew her integrity, but the evidence, however circumstantial, was difficult to ignore. "You're doubting me," Eliza demanded, her voice shaking with hurt and indignation. "After everything we've faced together. After I trusted you, Caleb Blackthorne." Caleb ran a hand through his dark hair, his face etched with turmoil. "It's not doubt, Eliza. It's I need to know the truth. For both our families. If Thomas is involved, we need to deal with it, quickly, before Vance uses it to tear us apart." Eliza felt a profound sense of betrayal. He was choosing to believe his man, his blood, over her. The fragile bridge they had built seemed to crumble around them. The love that had begun to flicker in the quiet moments between them, the respect that had slowly bloomed, felt suddenly extinguished, replaced by the bitter ashes of old resentments. "Fine," Eliza said, her voice cold as ice. "Then I'll find the truth. And when I do, you'll see how wrong you were to ever doubt me. Or my brother." She turned on her heel and stormed out, leaving Caleb standing alone, a heavy burden of suspicion and conflicting loyalties weighing on him. Their forced vows were truly tested, their nascent bond pushed to its breaking point. The whispers of betrayal threatened to drown out any hope of a true love's flame. Chapter 6: A Pact of Trust. The cold silence that descended between Eliza and Caleb after their heated argument was thicker and more chilling than any of the ranch's previous, open hostilities. Eliza, stung by Caleb's doubt, retreated to the Double H side of the ranch, gathering her brother Thomas. "Thomas, Silas Blackthorne claims he saw you out late the night the feed went missing," Eliza began, her voice strained but firm. "He said you were carrying something under your poncho. They're accusing you of sabotaging the herd and stealing the feed. You have to tell me what you were doing." Thomas, usually boisterous, looked down at his boots, his face etched with shame. "I was out, Eliza, but I wasn't stealing. I was meeting someone." He hesitated, then looked up, his eyes pleading. "It was Lily. She was meeting that circuit rider, John, in secret. She snuck out to see him, and I was just covering for her, bringing her back an extra blanket from her old house. I didn't want Pa to find out, or Caleb. You know how protective they are of her." Eliza stared at her brother, a wave of relief washing over her, quickly followed by exasperation. Lily, her headstrong younger sister, had a soft spot for the itinerant preacher. It was a perfectly innocent, if foolish, secret. "You idiot, Thomas. Why didn't you just say something?" "Because it would have gotten Lily in trouble. And I didn't want to make things worse with the Blackthorns, not now. But I didn't steal anything, Eliza, I swear." Eliza knew then, with absolute certainty, that her brother was telling the truth. The pieces clicked into place. Vance's meticulous planning, exploiting the smallest, most innocent secret to sow chaos. She felt a renewed surge of anger, not just at Vance, but at Caleb for his lack of faith. She marched back to the Blackthorne Ranch house, intending to confront Caleb with the truth, but found him already there, talking quietly with Ethan. "I think Silas might have been mistaken, Eliza," Caleb said, his voice hesitant. "Ethan did some looking. There were no tracks leading from our barn to your old homestead, and a man with Silas's eyesight, in the dark it's easy to misjudge. Besides, Jedediah," he gestured to his father, "he said he was out checking the fences that night too. Saw a rider on the old Holloway trail, but thought nothing of it. Couldn't make out who it was. But it was far from our barn." Eliza felt a flicker of surprise. Caleb had been investigating, not just accusing. He hadn't given up on her, not entirely. She swallowed her pride and explained about Lily and Thomas. Caleb listened, his expression slowly softening. "So it was just a misunderstanding. A foolish secret. Vance played us perfectly." He ran a hand through his hair, a look of profound regret on his face. "Eliza, I should have trusted you. I let the old resentments, the old doubts, cloud my judgment. I'm sorry." His apology, freely given, felt like a balm to her wounded pride. "And I shouldn't have stormed off," she admitted, meeting his gaze. "We both let Vance get into our heads. But we won't let it happen again. We prove Thomas innocent, and we find out who really stole that feed." They decided to work together, discreetly, to uncover the real culprit. They questioned ranch hands from both sides, looking for inconsistencies, for any other mysterious movements. They examined the cut fence where the mares had stampeded, looking for anything that didn't fit. It was Caleb who found it. Buried deep in the earth near the fence post, almost invisible to the casual eye, was a small, ornate silver button, unlike any worn by their ranch hands. "This isn't from our clothes," Caleb stated, holding it up. "Or yours. To fancy." Eliz's eyes narrowed. "I've seen these before. Vance's men. He has them specially made for his personal guards, a mark of his ownership." The button was a critical piece of evidence, clearing Thomas and pointing directly to Vance. They had been wrong to doubt each other. The realization, the shared relief, created a palpable shift between them. The fragile bridge of respect had not only been repaired but strengthened, fortified with the mortar of trust. Later that evening, after the men had dispersed, Eliza and Caleb found themselves alone on the porch, watching the stars begin to pepper the darkening sky. The usual awkwardness was gone, replaced by a comfortable silence. "You know," Eliza said, breaking the quiet, "my father always said the true measure of a man wasn't how he fought, but how he admitted he was wrong." Caleb looked at her, a faint smile touching his lips, his stormy eyes softening in the twilight. "And my father always said the true measure of a woman wasn't how she ran a ranch, but how she held her temper." They shared a small, genuine laugh. It was a breakthrough, a moment of shared vulnerability and humor that transcended their forced vows. "We need to tell the others about Thomas, about the button," Eliza said, her voice softer now. "Clear his name. Show them that Vance tried to divide us and failed." "We will," Caleb promised. He reached out, his calloused hand gently touching hers, a warmth spreading through her fingers. It was a simple touch, yet it felt monumental, a gesture of unspoken comfort and growing affection. "We're in this together, Eliza. Truly together now." She looked at his hand, then up at his face. The rigid lines had softened, the storm in his eyes replaced by a quiet intensity, a burgeoning warmth. In that moment, Eliza felt a strange, unfamiliar flutter in her chest. It wasn't just respect or partnership anymore. It was something deeper, something warmer, a tentative spark in the vast emptiness of the plains. The forced vows had become a pact of trust, and in its embrace, a true love's flame, hesitant but undeniable, had finally been kindled. Chapter 7. Unraveling the Conspiracy. With their trust firmly cemented, the focus of Eliza and Caleb's efforts shifted entirely to unmasking Sterling Vance. The silver button, a physical testament to his deception, proved invaluable. They publicly cleared Thomas's name, presenting the evidence to their combined ranch hands and families, laying bare Vance's calculated efforts to sow discord. The ranch was now truly united, their old feuds finally put to rest, replaced by a fierce, collective resolve against their common enemy. "He doesn't just want our land, or our cattle," Eliza explained to a gathered assembly of Holloways and Blackthorns. "He wants what's under it. Coal, maybe even something rarer. He's part of a much bigger syndicate." Caleb nodded grimly. "We found evidence of geological surveys at the Widow's Peak mine. He's looking for mineral rights." Their shared understanding of Vance's true ambition pushed them to embark on a dangerous investigation. They needed more concrete evidence, something that would not only expose Vance but also reveal the full extent of his shadowy syndicate. Their inquiries led them to a dilapidated assay office in the dusty, isolated mining town of Blackwater, rumored to be a hub for suspicious land dealings. "It's risky," Caleb cautioned Eliza as they prepared to ride out, leaving Ethan in charge of the ranch. "Blackwater is full of Vance's hired thugs. We go in quiet, get what we need, and get out." "I'm ready, Caleb," Eliza replied, checking her rifle. "We can't fight a war without knowing who all our enemies are." They rode for 2 days, disguised as a prospecting couple, their usual gear replaced by plainer clothes, their wedding rings conspicuously displayed to project an image of harmless domesticity. Blackwater was a grim, sun-baked town, its main street lined with saloons, gambling dens, and shadowy offices. The air was thick with desperation and the metallic tang of unrefined ore. They found the assay office, a single-story clapboard building, tucked away on a side street. It was guarded by 2 burly men, their eyes sharp and suspicious. Eliza and Caleb spent a day observing, noting patterns, waiting for an opportunity. That night, under the cover of a moonless sky, they broke into the office. Working in practiced silence, Eliza picked the lock while Caleb stood guard. Inside, the office was a cluttered mess of geological maps, financial ledgers, and mineral samples. Bingo, Caleb whispered, his finger tracing a line on a large map spread across a desk. It was their combined territory, marked with intricate grids and notations, highlighting potential coal and silver veins running deep beneath their ranchland. Eliza, meanwhile, found a locked strongbox. Caleb quickly picked the lock. Inside, they found a stack of official-looking documents, deeds, contracts, and letters. One letter, written on expensive stationery, detailed a meticulous plan to acquire their ranches through legal loopholes and fabricated claims. Backed by a shadowy consortium of investors based in the East, led by a powerful railroad magnate named Thaddeus Crane. Crane, Eliza breathed, her eyes wide. He's even bigger than Vance. This isn't just about land, it's about controlling a transportation route, a new rail line for his resources. As they gathered the incriminating documents, a sudden crash from outside sent their hearts plummeting. "Guards," Caleb whispered, grabbing Eliza's arm. "They're onto us." They barely made it out the back door as Vance's hired guns burst into the office, their shouts echoing in the night. Eliza and Caleb sprinted through the dark alleyways, dodging bullets, their disguise abandoned. They were cornered in a dead-end street when an unexpected figure emerged from the shadows, an elderly, grizzled prospector they had met earlier in the saloon, who had seemed harmlessly drunk. "This way, kids," the old man rasped, pushing aside a cleverly disguised plank in a fence, revealing a narrow passage. "I don't like Vance's kind, never have." They squeezed through, emerging into a labyrinth of old mining tunnels, a forgotten network beneath the town. The old prospector, Silas, no relation to Blackwood, led them through the dark, echoing passages, evading their pursuers. "Thank you," Eliza panted, as they finally emerged miles outside Blackwater, into the cool night air. "Just repaying an old favor," Silas said, giving them a knowing look. "Heard about you two. Heard you were fighting for what's right. Keep fighting." He winked, then disappeared back into the darkness. As they rode back towards their ranch, the shared danger and the exhilarating escape had forged an even deeper connection between them. They were no longer just allies. They were partners in every sense of the word. The intimacy of their shared peril had stripped away the last vestiges of their resentment. "We almost didn't make it," Eliza said, leaning her head against Caleb's shoulder as they rode through the night, the documents secured in her saddlebag. Caleb wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. "But we did. Because we worked together. Because I trust you, Eliza." His voice was low, tender. "And because I care about you. More than I thought possible." Eliza looked up at him, her heart soaring. His confession, spoken under the vast, silent canvas of the desert stars, was more precious than any silver. "I care about you too, Caleb," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "More than I ever imagined." He leaned down, and under the watchful eye of the countless stars, their lips met. It was a kiss born of shared danger, mutual respect, and a love that had defied generations of hatred. The forced vows had become a genuine commitment, and true love's flame, once a distant possibility, now burned brightly, illuminating their path forward. Chapter 8: The Price of Unity. The incriminating documents, now safely back at the Blackthorn Ranch, were a potent weapon, but their discovery also made Eliza and Caleb targets. Vance, enraged by their infiltration of Blackwater and the loss of his crucial evidence, escalated his campaign of terror. He was no longer trying to sow discord. He was aiming to crush them. The first blow came swiftly and brutally. One moonless night, a large contingent of Vance's hired guns descended upon the Double H, bypassing the usual Blackthorn patrols by exploiting an old, forgotten trail. They weren't after cattle or property. They were after people. Thomas Holloway, Eliza's younger brother, was ambushed while riding fence lines. He was badly beaten, left for dead, and the Double H bunkhouse was set ablaze, a terrifying message etched in fire. Eliza, upon hearing the news, felt a primal scream rise in her throat. Her home, her brother, targeted with such viciousness. Caleb found her at Thomas's bedside, her face pale, her hands trembling. "He'll live," the ranch doctor, a grizzled old man named Doc Miller, assured them, "but he's lucky. They meant to kill him." Caleb pulled Eliza into his arms, holding her tight as she finally allowed her tears to fall. "This is on me, Eliza," he murmured into her hair. "I should have anticipated this." I underestimated his ruthlessness. No, Eliza choked out, pulling back, her eyes blazing with fierce determination. This is on Vance. And we're going to make him pay. The attack, brutal as it was, had an unintended effect. It solidified the unity of their people. The Holloways, seeing the Blackthorn's genuine concern and support, rallied around Caleb. The Blackthorn men, witnessing the suffering of the Holloways, forgot their old resentments. They were no longer two separate families. They were one, bound by shared grief and a burning desire for justice. The crisis forced Eliza and Caleb to make painful sacrifices. The burned bunkhouse needed immediate rebuilding, and Thomas's medical expenses were steep. To cover the costs and to bolster their defenses, they had to sell off a portion of their beloved herd, a decision that weighed heavily on both of them. It was a tangible price of their unity, a testament to the harsh realities of their fight. During these trying times, their love, born in the crucible of shared danger, deepened into an unbreakable bond. Late one night, after long hours of tending to the wounded, organizing repairs, and planning their next moves, Eliza found Caleb sitting alone on the porch, staring out at the darkened plains. She sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We'll get through this, Caleb," she whispered. "We always do." He turned to her, his hand reaching for hers, intertwining their fingers. "I was a fool, Eliza. A proud, stubborn fool. To ever think I could live without you, without your strength, your fire." His voice was rough with emotion. "I love you, Eliza Holloway. More than these lands, more than my own life." Eliza's heart swelled. "And I love you, Caleb Blackthorn," she confessed, her voice thick with tears and joy. "I love the way you fight for what's right, the way you protect your people, the way you make me feel like I finally belong." She looked into his eyes, now softened by love, and knew, with absolute certainty, that this was real. This was their true love's flame, burning bright against the darkness. Their declaration of love, raw and heartfelt, solidified their partnership in a way no forced vow ever could. They faced the dawn together, no longer just husband and wife by decree, but by choice, by love, and by an unbreakable commitment to their shared future. The attack had been a grievous blow, but it had failed to divide them. Instead, it had forged them into an unyielding force. The ranch hands, Blackthorn and Holloway alike, now moved as one, their loyalty to their united leaders absolute. They had paid a heavy price for their unity, but in doing so, they had discovered a strength and a love that Vance could never hope to break. The stage was set for the final confrontation. Chapter 9: The Final Stand. Armed with Vance's incriminating documents, a unified ranch, and a love that had defied all odds, Eliza and Caleb prepared for their final confrontation. They knew Vance, backed by Thaddeus Crane's powerful syndicate, wouldn't go down without a fight. The stakes were nothing less than their future, their land, and their very way of life. Their plan was meticulous. Caleb, drawing on his strategic mind, outlined the legal and tactical maneuvers. Eliza, with her intimate knowledge of the Double H and the surrounding terrain, identified key weaknesses in Vance's local operations. They decided to strike onto fronts, a legal challenge in the territorial court, using the documents as undeniable proof of fraud and conspiracy, and a direct, strategic confrontation with Vance's local forces. "We hit him where it hurts," Caleb explained to their assembled ranch hands, both Blackthorn and Holloway. "We expose his lies in court, and we reclaim our territory from his thugs. No more letting him dictate the terms." The courthouse in the nearest territorial capital was a grand, imposing building, a symbol of order in a wild land. Eliza and Caleb, accompanied by Granger, the Pinkerton agent they had secretly contacted, presented the evidence before a stunned judge and a room packed with local officials and curious onlookers. The documents detailed Vance's fraudulent land claims, his intimidation tactics, and his deep ties to Crane's railroad syndicate. Vance, present in the courtroom, sneered, confident in his power and connections. But as Granger presented irrefutable proof, linking Vance's operation to blackmail and illegal land grabs, the color drained from Vance's face. He knew his game was up. Before the judge could issue a verdict, a commotion erupted outside. Vance's hired guns, a small army of desperados, had descended upon the town, attempting to storm the courthouse, clearly an act of desperation to seize the evidence and silence Eliza and Caleb. They're making their move, Caleb roared, drawing his Colt. Protect the documents. Protect the judge. The courthouse immediately transformed into a battlefield. Eliza, her rifle already in hand, took cover behind a heavy wooden bench, returning fire with lethal precision. Caleb, a formidable presence, stood shoulder to shoulder with his unified ranch hands, defending the entrance. Shots rang out, glass shattered, and the shouts of men mingled with the frantic cries of innocent townsfolk. Eliza and Caleb fought as one, their movements fluid and coordinated, anticipating each other's needs without a word. Eliza covered Caleb as he reloaded, and he provided suppressing fire as she moved to a better vantage point. Their love, forged in the crucible of this desperate struggle, lent them an unbreakable strength. Outside, the combined force of the Holloways and Blackthorns, along with a few brave townspeople who rallied to their cause, engaged Vance's men in a street-level brawl. Ethan Blackthorn, displaying a surprising ferocity, fought alongside Thomas Holloway, their shared purpose overriding any lingering animosity. Vance, seeing his plans crumbling and his men falling, made a desperate dash for the back door of the courthouse, hoping to escape. Caleb, anticipating his move, intercepted him. "It's over, Vance," Caleb shouted, his voice ringing with authority. Vance, his face contorted with rage, drew his pearl-handled revolver. "It's never over, Blackthorn. Not as long as men like you try to stand in the way of progress," he fired. Caleb, quick as a flash, dove aside, the bullet embedding itself in the wall behind him. Eliza, seeing Vance aim again, leveled her rifle and fired, not at Vance, but at his gun hand. The shot was precise, striking his wrist, forcing him to drop his weapon with a howl of pain. Federal marshals, called by Granger earlier, arrived just then, swarming the area. Vance, wounded and defeated, was quickly subdued and arrested. His hired guns, overwhelmed and demoralized, either surrendered or fled. The battle was over. The courthouse was scarred, but the evidence was safe, and justice had prevailed. Eliza and Caleb stood together amidst the chaos, covered in dust and sweat, but alive and victorious. They looked at each other, their eyes reflecting not just the shared exhaustion, but a profound sense of relief, pride, and an even deeper, unshakable love. Caleb reached for Eliza's hand, lacing their fingers together, a silent, powerful testament to their true love's flame. Chapter 10, True Love's Horizon. In the wake of Sterling Vance's defeat, the dust slowly settled over their united territories, not just the literal dust of battle, but the metaphorical dust of generations of feuding. The legal proceedings against Vance and his syndicate were swift and decisive, thanks to the overwhelming evidence provided by Eliza, Caleb, and Agent Granger. Thaddeus Crane's grand scheme to monopolize the region's mineral wealth was dismantled, his reputation shattered, and his powerful consortium brought to its knees. Back at the ranch, the rebuilding began. The Double H bunkhouse, once a symbol of Vance's malice, was rebuilt with the combined efforts of both Holloway and Blackthorn hands, a tangible monument to their newfound unity. The physical scars on the land slowly began to heal, just as the emotional wounds of the feud started to mend. Laughter, once a rare sound on the borderlands, now echoed freely from the bunkhouses, as the men, no longer rivals, shared stories and worked towards a common future. Eliza and Caleb, no longer bound by forced vows but by a deep and abiding love, solidified their partnership in every sense. Their marriage, once a strategic alliance, had blossomed into a true union of hearts and minds. They led the expanded, unified ranch as co-equals, their complementary strengths creating an even more formidable force. Eliza's keen eye for ranch management and her innovative spirit blended seamlessly with Caleb's strategic foresight and his deep understanding of the land. They stood together on the mesa where Eliza had once contemplated her grim fate, now a place of shared dreams. The sun, a golden orb, dipped towards the horizon, painting the vast sky in hues of orange, purple, and crimson. The cattle grazed peacefully in the distance, a testament to their resilience and the prosperity that now bloomed across their combined lands. "Who would have thought," Eliza murmured, leaning into Caleb, "that a forced marriage, born of desperation, could lead to this?" Caleb wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer, his gaze sweeping across their magnificent, sprawling territory. "It wasn't the vows that bound us, Eliza. It was the fire. The fire of the feud that almost consumed us, and the fire of our own hearts that refused to let us fall. He kissed her temple, his lips lingering. You challenged me, Holloway. You made me see beyond my own pride, beyond my own family's grievances. You made me a better man. Eliza looked up at him, her eyes shining with love. And you, Blackthorn, you taught me that strength isn't just in stubbornness, but in trust. You made me see that even the wildest Mustang can find a home and a partner in the right corral. Their love story, once a desperate gamble for peace, became a legend in the West. It was whispered around campfires and told in saloons, a testament to how even the deepest feuds could be overcome by shared purpose, unwavering loyalty, and the unexpected, powerful blaze of a true love's flame. They had forged not just a ranch, but a legacy of unity, ensuring that their children, and their children's children, would grow up in a land where the names Holloway and Blackthorn were no longer symbols of division, but of an enduring, unbreakable bond. As the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, bathing the land in a soft, golden glow, Eliza and Caleb stood together, their hands clasped, their hearts full. The future stretched before them, a vast, open horizon, filled with shared dreams, unwavering love, and the promise of a peaceful, prosperous life in the untamed West. Their journey from forced vows to true love's flame was complete, and their story, a true wild cowboy tale, would echo through the canyons for generations to come.